What is up, everyone? It is digital host AJ Weiss today. This weekend is a very special weekend if you're living in the Huntsville area. It is Panoply, and of course, I am joined today with Miss Jessica Ann Nunno. She has the Panoply cover art for the 2024 Panoply Festival, the Panoply Arts Festival. But Jessica, thank you so much for joining with me today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So behind us right now is All the Fantastical Beasts Come Out to Play.
Yes, that's the title. It's a long title, but I felt like a fitting one.
It is a very beautiful piece. This is the cover art for Panoply this year. And just talk about like the process of creating something as amazing as this.
Well, this was definitely a long process. I knew that I had the poster art back in December, but I had I had through Christmas and a few other months to try to get my idea and everything together. But of course, it was going on through Christmas and all of the sales seasons and everything. Yeah. I actually went through a couple of different versions of the poster before we finally landed on this version, and whenever you're working with a client, right, it's always you go in with an idea, and especially with Panoply, it's taken up in front of a group of people, and everyone has an opinion on what the way something should be, but it's like that with any sort of commission process. So we finally settled on, after it was the Panoply team had a meeting, and all of the volunteers ended up having this sort of storytelling session, and they all ended up with these stories about fishes and ducks, which I'm sure if you're familiar with Big Spring Park, you know there's fish and ducks everywhere, and they all kind of have their own little personality to them. Yeah. I actually teach over at the museum, so my classrooms over there literally overlook the pond, and so all of my students like to go out there and feed the fish and the ducks, and the ducks like to wander the parking lot and everything out there and just get in everybody's way. So I got told that every single volunteer who's been volunteering for Panoply for ages now, that they all had a story about a fish or a duck or a fish and ducks. And they're like, well, you are known for creature design, so we want you to do something surrounding that theme. So I had a piece originally created with all sorts of people and kids and stuff in it, and we ended up going completely a totally different direction, taking away all of the people, and I went with this instead, and I actually completed this piece in 9 days straight, and it took me 109 hours once we finally settled on what we wanted. So it was like I said, it was a process.
So once you started it, you said you put in that much work.
Well, I put in all sorts of work before I ever even got into those 109 hours. Yeah. But once I started it, I literally calculated it. It was 109 hours straight over 9 days.
Wow. Did you sleep?
No.
No?
No, I did not.
The grind never stops.
No.
Well, it is super beautiful. Just all the elements to it. I believe that is a dragon. Can you walk me through what each thing kind of represents?
Well, so the dragon is because it's the year of the dragon.
Okay.
So the dragon is acting as the Pied Piper. So if you notice, the dragon's tail is like a flute. So there's musical notes that are coming up and trailing. So they're calling all of the creatures, and that's the whole idea of the title, is that they're being called to come out to play. So all of these fantastical beasts that we didn't know existed around us are being called because of the dragon in the year of the dragon. So the dragon is leading the charge, except right here, you see this little two-headed duck. That's a long-standing character of mine. I've had this character for 5 or 6 years at this point, and I decided if I'm doing fish and ducks, I wanted my fish and my ducks to be in it. So their names are Quackers and Crackers, and they're Siamese twins, and they're super annoying. They're annoying to each other, they're annoying to everybody else around them, and they decided to jump in front of the dragon and be the ones to lead, not the dragon. So they grabbed their batons, and they're now the technical leads after the dragon started its thing. That's like the way the story of it goes.
Yeah.
And so the dragon is calling all of the creatures, and so all of the fish, kind of like, you know, in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, how all of the dolphins end up flying in it, right?
Yeah.
So all of the fish, all of the koi fish that are in the pond come out, and they start flying a lot like the dolphins in Hitchhiker's Guide. And so then these are representative of the actual koi fish, like they've got patternings of koi that are on them on the bridge.
Right. Wow.
And of course, I was trying to represent all of the different, all of the different arts in it. So we've got like the dancing and the performance, the plein air duck, who's painting the scene of what's going on around him, and then the music. So hitting like the different types of art. And then this guy over here is he's the white thing, which is Alabama's state cryptid.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if that was a troll or like the troll under the bridge.
It is supposed to be kind of like the troll under the bridge, but it's specifically Alabama's state cryptid, the white thing, which is it's a Bigfoot derivative. You know how like every state has its own flower, has its own color, has its own song. Well, every state has its own mythological beast, and the white thing is Alabama's. It's across, like, it's got some lion-esque elements to it. It's got some Bigfoot-esque elements. I actually just finished, you're going to see it in the park over the weekend. I took the design of him because I have him crouched under there kind of like the whole troll being under a bridge. I have a thing for trolls. And so I was trying to figure out how to incorporate him, so I made him a little bit troll-like. But I ended up, they came back and they asked me to do an entire full body piece of the white thing. So I just finished that a week ago, and now I think it's going to be in standees like around the park for people to take pictures of. So he's really small there, but we should see him almost life-sized over the weekend.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so cool. I saw this, like, at first glance, I'm like, I just knew, without knowing the meaning behind any of this, I just knew it was something special. I am new, you're educating me, like, I had no idea the white thing was the Alabama beast. I'm actually new to Alabama. I'm from Georgia.
I'm not from here either, so
Yeah,
I
right.
totally get that.
Right.
I'm from Connecticut,
Okay.
so I moved down here back in 2011. Actually, it was 6 weeks before. Do you remember hearing about the big tornado like season that came through here?
Yes, in 74?
It was, no, 2011. There was like
yes.
100-something tornadoes that dropped. I moved here 6 weeks before then, and then got hit directly by a tornado. Yeah, it was great. That was my welcome to Alabama.
What happened? Were you in a house?
I was in a house, yeah, and it came through the backyard, ripped off part of the roof, destroyed a shed, destroyed a fence. That was an interesting experience.
I'd imagine not the best welcome to Alabama.
It was what everyone feared when I moved down here. Then of course it happened.
For sure. It's like me. As soon as I moved here to Alabama, that winter storm came through.
Oh, you've really been here like
3 months.
Yes.
Yeah, the winter storm came through, and I was trapped in my apartment.
Maybe that's just how Alabama welcomes people.
Maybe
storms.
It is. I don't know why they welcome us this way. It could be sunshine and 75. I wouldn't complain, but
yeah.
But very cool. So. You actually got your BFA at a visual arts school in New York City? Yeah,
I went to the School of Visual Arts. It's one of the higher end art schools in the United States. Yeah. I grew up about 45 minutes from the border of Manhattan, so I was already familiar with like city life when I moved there, but it was a really big thing like when I got into the school, and I spent 4 years there. I got my BFA. So my background literally is in illustration and doing stuff like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk about kind of going to school in New York and kind of how that influenced your art that you do today?
Oh, it's yeah, I would say it directly has. My work is, as far as I'm aware, not a lot. It's not like other people's around here, and the way that I present it too is very different. I like very clean cut. Whenever I present my stuff, it's very clean cut and very like sleek. So you'll notice when everyone sees this framed over the weekend, I put all of my stuff, because I work in really bright colors, against a black background. So this will be matted with a black mat against the black frame. Even all of my stuff in my studio at Lomel, my walls are black rather than white. White is a pretty standard, like the whole white walled gallery is a pretty standard thing, but the opposite of that is black. So it's just, whether it's white or black, it's super clean cut. And I'm using that on purpose to bring out all of the bright colors that I use. Yeah. And that's kind of how I was taught when I was in school, was very, very clean presentations of things. Mm-hmm. So I'd say that that's definitely influenced the way I present all of my work. It's definitely influenced my workflow, for sure. They pushed us really hard in school. Right. So we were working constantly, nonstop. Every class I had was no less than a 3-hour class. Because it was a BFA, we had to have more credits to be able to graduate.
It's an intense program.
It was a very, very intense program. And it more than, I would honestly say it's influenced the way I push myself work-wise now, as I tend to go at a very non-stop pace. And I'm pretty sure I've just been doing it since college and never stopped. Yeah. Yeah.
I can tell. You said you didn't sleep while creating this.
Oh, no. And I just got back from Pennsylvania last night, so I just drove 15 hours yesterday. So I was doing a show out there, and yeah, I go.
Wow, that's so awesome. So growing up, what would you say was your biggest influence on your artwork, and what kind of drove you to want to pursue art?
I've always drawn. There are pictures of me from the time that I was like real young, with paints, and apparently I used to take crayons, and I had like this obsession with my crayons box, where I had to keep everything in a very specific order, but then I had to like peel all of the paper off of the crayons. My mother came back to me a couple of years ago saying that she didn't understand why I did that, and I was like, Mom, the paper got in the way of the crayons and it was super obnoxious, so it had to come off. Like, I still do it now. And she's like, you knew that at like 3? And I was like, well, yeah, the paper was obnoxious and it got in the way of the crayons. But yeah, I've always drawn, so I'm generally pretty miserable if I'm not drawing. So I usually go only like a couple of days without sketching something. I usually have anywhere from 10 to like 30 or 40 pieces started at a time. Wow. It's pretty ridiculous, but I have lots of things started.
What are some of your favorites? I know it's hard to you really can't pick a favorite as an artist.
Like a favorite piece or a genre?
Yes.
I lean very much to science fiction, and I do a lot of my work is very science fiction and fantasy based, but it's also very horror macabre based. Mm-hmm. It's something that I've leaned to over and over again. When I grew up, I didn't have a whole lot of restrictions on like what I watched and like what caught my interest. So I was always watching stuff about ghosts. I was watching stuff about like really strange stories. Like, I grew up on the old Twilight Zone, on the old Outer Limits. Like the X-Files is something that I became obsessed with for a really long time. So my dad had like this library of movies, and I probably watched, I want to say I watched just about everything in his library that he had. And I mean, he had a wall full of tapes and a very neatly cataloged card system where each tape had a number on it, and it had a corresponding index card, and then each index card had the list of all of the movies that were on the tape.
Wow.
So I would sit and I would just watch like movie after movie after movie, and I would say it was highly influential to what I ended up doing now.
You can tell there's definitely a storytelling influence on your art. Can you kind of talk about your passion for storytelling as well?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I had a reading comprehension problem, and I couldn't read. Like, I couldn't process what was going on the page. And I remember looking at all of the words, and they would just be jumbled, and I would skip lines, and nothing like made sense. So rather than skip a grade, I ended up going into this pretty intense after school program that I was in for about 2 years. And they pushed me to learn how to read. And you know, like there are those times where you have those light bulb moments.
Yes.
But you actually recognize that they're a light bulb moment. You can sort of feel the switch flip and suddenly something makes sense. I remember when it made sense and reading started to, like I could read and comprehend what it was that was happening. And that was about 3rd grade. And so when I finally was able to read, I was able to pick up a book, and one of the first books I picked up, I'm pretty sure that it was like a kid's version, but I picked up Moby Dick.
Yeah.
And so I read Moby Dick, and that was one of the first things that I went all the way through and was able to comprehend what was going on. So of course that's a creature story, and I was like, I consider myself to be a creature designer now. So I guess looking back at that, I was just always influenced by creatures and aliens and things like that. But I remember reading it, comprehending it, and like I became obsessed with books, and I couldn't stop reading. Like I was that very stereotypical kid who was reading with a flashlight underneath the covers, and
Yep.
I am very positive that's why I wear glasses now. And so I became obsessed with, between the movies and the books and all of that, I became obsessed with the idea of storytelling. And I do write. Like I have my own stories that I'm working on, but I show it more through my illustrations. And the whole idea behind an illustration is it's supposed to illuminate text. That's a pretty literal definition of what illustration is. So my love of drawing, my love of stories, my love of like the written word. I actually believe if I hadn't gone into illustration, I probably would have gone into directing. But I love storytelling in general. And I usually I help a lot of my students tell their stories. I have at least 10 of their stories in my head that I'm trying to keep track of, plus my own. Yeah. I've got one student who has been working diligently on his story for a year. We've literally taken it from concept to he's storyboarded an entire graphic novel, and we're in the process now of getting his anatomy up where it needs to be so that he can actually draw it digitally. And he's stayed up on it for, it's over a year now, probably about a year and a half that he's been working on this story. So I help my students develop their stories too, on top of trying to develop all of mine.
Very good. You were clearly very busy.
Yeah.
Can you talk about, you mentioned teaching. Can you talk about the classes that you teach?
Yeah, I actually run a school. I have a studio over
Yes.
at Low Mill, which is like right around the corner from here. It's over on the first floor, and last year I had the opportunity to open up. I had a very small space at the mill for years and years, and I taught private lessons. But I had the opportunity, it was just over a year ago, to move to the first floor, and I opened up a very large space which allowed me to start teaching group classes. And so I structure all of my group classes around art fundamentals, illustration concepts, comic concepts, story development. I have classes primarily for like middle school and up at my studio, but at the museum I have taught pre-K, I've taught kindergarten. I just finished the kindergarten class this morning. over at the museum.
Yeah.
But at my studio, I could teach a lot more like really skill-driven things. So I have classes on character design, on creature design, on like literal foundational fundamentals. So like learning how to take line and go from line to form and understanding shadow and things along those lines. But I constantly get asked about anatomy. So I ended up building, I never thought that that was going to be a thing. And I got asked about anatomy so much. I have an entire curriculum surrounding how to develop human and animal anatomy and how to turn it into like creatures and characters and like you know, the fantastical things that I do here. Yes. And actually making anatomy make sense. At one point I taught, prior to me running my own school, I taught STEM and STEAM. Yeah. So I taught physics for a while. And I get accused by my students that a lot of my classes have a science element to them, and they're like, is this a science class or an art class? And I'm like, well, you know, it's only recently that those two things have separated. They're actually, they go very much hand in hand.
Wow. I guess I never really thought of that. Like, I always think, oh, that's an art, that's a science. Can you go further into like how art is a science?
Sure. Well, okay, so from the standpoint of just looking at stuff like this, right? Anatomically, well, okay, let's go into like a movie, right? We have all seen movies, we've all played video games where the creature is awful. You can tell it's an awful design. It doesn't move right. It seems to defy logic. And you're like immediately turned off by the story because of that, and you just can't like tune into it anymore because it's not believable. So that's where like the anatomy comes in, right? Understanding the way something actually moves, being able to take creatures that, like animals that already exist on our planet, because, well, maybe there's alien life. There probably is alien life, but for all we know, we've never encountered it. So all we have to do is go on what we've got here, and we've got plenty here to go off of to be able to create our own creatures. So we use real anatomy, and you have to be able to take like the two-headed duck, right? Being
Quacky
able
and clacky?
Quackers and crackers.
Quackers and clackers.
So, in order to get them to move properly, right, I had to work through getting the spine to align up. And if I didn't do that, the movement on the character, like no matter how I chose to move it, wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't feel right. It wouldn't feel believable. So when I'm teaching things like creature design, right, I make all of my students figure out the type of biome the creature would live in, where it falls on the food chain, what's actually happening on the planet. Is it on an Earth-like planet? Where is it actually in regards to its sun? Is it like a gas planet? Is it, you know, literally what's in its environment that it's in, because that's going to directly influence its design. You don't want to have a creature that appears to come from water living in a fire environment. Right. Or if you do, what can you do to make that make sense, right? So I have a student, he's actually my sister's stepson from back in Connecticut. We hop on Zoom once a week. And he started talking about creatures that he was going to be creating living in like a really low level on an old form of our planet, where it just became really super mechanical. But these creatures evolved and they were living near the core of the planet. And so I was like, okay, well, let's look up actual hot biomes, lava biomes. I was like, specifically, we want to look at biomes that are like lava biomes that are underwater. And so I had him look up all sorts of creatures that actually exist already underneath the water and near lava. And so I was like, use this. These creatures are strange enough as they already are, as they already exist. Like there's the iron snail. It's the only living creature, as far as I'm aware, that actually has iron in its body. And it,
Really?
yeah, it developed that so that it could live near the lava. So I was like, use this, take even just this one element from that to design your creature and have it make sense, have it be something that somebody recognizes. So I'm constantly having them look up references of things and learn about the science of what's actually out there already.
That's so cool. Yeah. That's something I'm obviously not an artist. That's something I don't think about. So that is super cool. Well, you're no stranger to Panoply.
Yeah, I've been to Panoply. I've been to Panoply a few times. This will actually be my third Panoply, but I've done Panoply many, many years for other organizations. Yes. So like back when I was teaching STEM, right, I did, they have like a STEM and STEAM row over at Panoply where they do like kids projects and like make and takes. So I did that for a number of years. At one point I worked for a martial arts studio, and they used to have a tent at Panoply, so I would go and like work the tent for them.
So cool. So
I've been to Panoply a number of times, but this is only my third year being there for myself.
Very cool. Can you talk a little bit about like what drove you to come to Huntsville? You mentioned you were from Connecticut originally.
It's actually, it was a person that brought me here. I'm no longer like with that person, but it was a relationship that brought me here. And after that relationship ended, one of the reasons that I stayed was actually low mill. I had started getting myself involved in the art community around here, and I had made a number of friends, and I was doing shows and everything around here. I had started building my business. So after all of that, I chose to stay and to build everything up like around what I already had, what I was already like establishing. And I've definitely grown it. I've grown it a lot since then. And then my mom actually moved down here a few years ago to be with me. So now I actually have some family here.
Very cool. Low Mill, it seems like a strong community there.
Yeah, Low Mill is definitely a strong community. It's Low Mill is really special, and that's one of the reasons that I chose to stay too. There are other places like it in the U.S., but there's not other places exactly like it. It's, I believe, has the status that it's the largest private art community in the southern United States. So there's roughly 150 studios there, and it's basically like a mall of artists. Now, like I said, there are other artist communities all over the United States, but none quite like this one, none structured quite like Low Mill, none with the capacity of Low Mill. So it's got a very big draw for artists to have a community like that. And there are artists who have moved here specifically to have studios at Low Mill from like other areas of the country.
Very cool. What would you say your favorite part of Panoply is?
Well, for me, it's seeing the other artists who got juried in and are there. Seeing the level of work. Like I do a lot of different shows, but because it's a juried festival, right? Everybody's artwork goes up in front of a panel, and so the artwork that's in there is usually like really top-notch artwork by really awesome artists. There are other artists at Panoply that do a lot with creatures and fantasy-based things as well, from, again, all over the country. And so I enjoy going and walking the festival. It's one of the few festivals where I go and I actually make sure I have an assistant at it so that I can leave and I can go check out the other artists' work and go shopping for myself. Right. So a lot of the artwork that I have up on my walls has come from other artists at Panoply.
Very awesome. What would you say your living room looks like if you could describe it? How many art pieces do you have on the wall?
Well, I have so much artwork that there's still some in boxes. And I actually had someone tell me that like they have a setup, very similar where it's very eclectic, where they've just gone like up on their ceiling and started like layering artwork on their ceiling. I'm probably about to that point, having to go up rather than out. Mm-hmm. And I do a lot of like, everything's layered. So like I have buttons, I collect buttons, but I need someplace to put the buttons, so they're hanging on a tapestry. So I have a tapestry just full of the buttons.
Wow. That's so cool. Where can people find you on social media if they want to like look for some of your artwork?
So I actually recently, when I opened up like my new studio space at the mill, I switched all of my social media handles because I wanted it to go along with like the new direction I was going with things. So it's Inkspitter Studio now. Yeah. So all of my social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, it's all at Inkspitter Studio. My website is inkspitterstudio.com. So it's pretty simple to find, but that's where I'm taking everything now and trying to get like the new social media handles up and running.
Oh, absolutely. Inkspitter Studios. I know if you're watching at home, you better take notes. But yeah, absolutely. I think you actually I read somewhere you like to do art. Obviously, vibrancy is a big priority for you, but you also like markers.
I do, yeah. I have, that's kind of where the ink part comes in, like to the name that I ended up changing everything to. I have an obsession with ink because ink is vibrant, and it's also very challenging because if you make a mistake with it, like you really can't go backwards, and so there's like a huge challenge that comes along with using that particular material. But I like alcohol markers. I've had an obsession with alcohol markers since I got out of college, and my friends got me like my first, it was like a graduation present. They got me my first like 12 alcohol markers, and they can be so expensive. Yeah. And so they saved up and they got me my first set of those particular markers, and I still have them because a lot of people don't know that the markers are refillable and every part of them is replaceable.
Really?
So I've got thousands of dollars invested into markers, and I still have those 12 markers because of the fact that I've replaced the tips, I've replaced the ink on the inside, and so I have like a whole library full of the markers that I use. And yeah, I like them because they're transparent, so you can use them a lot like watercolors. Mm-hmm. A lot of people look at my stuff and they think initially that it's watercolor.
That's what I thought, yeah.
But it's because I'm using watercolor techniques to put the markers down. So it's very cool. It's in my opinion, it's a versatile medium, but it's something too that a lot of my students have a fascination with. They all want to know how to use markers, so they all end up you want to know how to use markers.
I want to know.
Yeah, I teach all of them how to use it, and they all say, like, everyone says I have a very unique fine lining technique, so like all the black line work. I guess a lot of people think that it's comic line work, but it's not. It actually came from me learning how to hand letter. It was kind of driven into me in college when I took a hand lettering class, how to vary my line weights. So I ink like a letter. And so all of my students now are kind of picking up on my style of things. So I've got like my own little alcohol marker fine liner student community that's developing, which is pretty cool. It's kind of cool to see.
That's so awesome. Well, Jessica, if there's anything that maybe I didn't ask and you have something to add?
No, I'd say you definitely asked a lot of questions, so thank you.
Super talented stuff. I'm just so amazed by how you manage to stay sane and do everything that you're doing.
I mean, I can't say that I actually still have my sanity, so.
But I'm very impressed by just everything you do on the daily and just the grind. And I'm super excited to see all that Panoply has to offer because
Yes,
this is
you've never
first
been
ever
before.
Panoply I'll be going to. But,
Yeah, well, I hope that you
yeah.
enjoy it, because Panoply is definitely, it's something special that happens around here, and it brings out, like, it literally brings out the entire Huntsville community and people surrounding Huntsville as well. It really is genuinely a really big thing. And I know we're supposed to have clear weather this weekend. It's supposed to be nice, so that's a good thing.
That's always a good thing.
Yeah, that's always a good thing, especially since, like you said, you moved here.
And the storm, and the tornado for you.
We never have weather like that, by the way.
Right.
Like,
it's
ever.
only when someone's moving here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a criteria. But you'll get to see like some really awesome artists there, and then like the Arts Huntsville staff will be there as well. There's some really awesome people. I've been working with them for years on various different things.
Very cool. Well, I actually do have one more question for anyone who might be watching at home right now, who wants to be an aspiring artist. What would you say to them?
Like about getting started?
Well, getting started, the process of getting their work out there, all that.
Well, it's going to take time. Nothing happens overnight. There's no such thing as an overnight success. It might seem that way because suddenly something pops up on social media and it goes viral. But all of the years worth of work that it took to get to that point, like the years worth of work to get me to this point, just studying wise, right? That was a long time coming. And even though like I have my background in my BFA and like, you know, I went to school to be a professional illustrator, it took me honestly about 10 years to get to where I'm at right now. Like that's a very real number.
Wow.
And I started off, like when I moved here too, I also left behind all of my New York connections. So I had to start here from like next to nothing. And your connections make a difference. Going to a festival like Panoply and taking the time to talk to the artists. Now, not all of them are going to have, you know, the time to be able to talk to you and have like a full-fledged conversation with you directly at the festival. But I can tell like people that if you go and you express an interest in wanting to learn more and you take like the artist business card and you send them an email, more than likely they're not going to ignore you. Like ask questions, you know, make connections, go to the social functionings. When I first started, I remember I was 16 and I went to my very first comic convention and I did exactly that. I went from table to table to table to table in Artist Alley, just asking question after question after question. And, you know, one question breeds a new question, and as you learn more, you really want to go and you want to hit the people who are professional up for the knowledge that they have, because it's valuable. So I would say ask questions, and you are going to have far more failures than successes. Like I preach it to my students all the time. They see me fail constantly. They see me on a bad day of drawing. I let them see in my artwork every single time I've messed up in a piece. In fact, I take it as an exercise and I walk them through and say, tell me where I messed up. And usually they can't identify it, but when I point it out to them, they can never not see it, because like they can see where I made the alteration or the change or covered something up. You're going to have failures. I've had failed shows. I've had like ideas that I've put into motion and they haven't worked. You will have more of those than you will successes. But the thing is, with your failures, you learn just as much from your failures, if not more, than you do from your successes. And having the willpower to keep yourself going, like through all of that, is super important. I would also say don't go and just make yourself full-time. Like definitely hang on to a part-time job and just give yourself the commitment, the actual commitment that you're going to take what you do and do it part-time. if you go and you don't have a stable source of income, you kind of need one source of income to feed the other, because the statement is true that you need money to be able to make money. It's a very true thing. Like all of my inventory that I have to be able to sell at Panoply, I had to invest in all of that inventory in advance just to be able to sell it. So you need to have something to be able to put in to be able to get back from it. And then if you're going to do shows, right, you need to be able to purchase the table. You purchase the table in advance. You have to put money into marketing and things along those lines. So you do want to have something additional before you let go of it and you just move like into doing something full-time. I am full-time with what I do, but I wasn't always full-time with what I did, even though I went to school for it, even though I have, you know, like my fancy degree and everything. I didn't actually go full-time until 2020, at a really bad time too. That was also a 6-week thing. I went full-time 6 weeks before the entire country shut down. That was great.
Wow.
But also too, when you have like your back up against the wall,
Yeah.
that's when you tend to get the most creative as well, and you either make something work or it doesn't work.
Just keep going. That's
Yes.
what you're saying. Yeah.
Yes, you literally just have to keep going, and things are going to be hard to do what I do. They really are hard, but you have to make sure that you're passionate about it and that you find what you're doing worth it. You have to believe in it in order for it doesn't matter whether it's art or anything else. You have to believe in what you're doing, because no matter what, like, it's hard.
That's right. Well, Jessica, this has been amazing chatting with you today.
Thank you.
I'm sure we could talk for so much longer, because you are a super fascinating person.
Oh, thank you.
But this has been great. For anyone watching at home, make sure you head out to Panoply this weekend. Check out some of Jessica's amazing artwork, and I hope to see you guys there.